Is new BVI Ports Authority Chairman and locals dominate recent appointments. These and more stories when 284 News returns.
We understand that you cannot come to the store and encourage you to stay at home. If you need assistance with bill payments, top-ups, or troubleshooting, we are here to help. Call us at 444-4444 from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. daily, or visit our website at www.cctbvi.com. Click Top Up here or My CCT for top-up or bill payments. Social distancing with CCT.
Welcome everybody. It's Tuesday, May 19th, 2020. A terrific Tuesday to each and every one of you. I'm Ron Grant.
And I am Javon Wilson here with another edition of 284 News.
Now, we have lots in store for you, but before we get into our newscast today, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions is reminding the public of its stance on victims of crimes seeking to discontinue matters before the court. Director of Public Prosecutions, Mrs. Tiffany Scatliff-Esprit, said that there has been a number of instances where a victim of a crime has sent correspondence to her office asking for their matter to be discontinued in informing investigative officers of such. Mrs. Scatliff-Esprit said that only the Director of Public Prosecutions can discontinue proceedings. She said, and I quote, "Even if a victim is no longer wishing or desirous to proceed with the matter, it does not mean that the matter will be automatically discontinued." Mrs. Scatliff-Esprit acknowledged that discontinuing a matter is a serious decision and the public's interest, seriousness, and nature of the offense, as well as other factors of the law, have to be considered before such a decision is taken. The DPP said that should a victim not wish to proceed with their matter, they would have to give a statement to the police explaining why they no longer wish to continue the decision to not proceed if there is, which is of their own violation, the statement said. Now, she said, you would be submitted for consideration, and based on the circumstances and nature of the case, the victim may have to attend court and state on oath that they no longer wish to proceed. Cases involving harm to children, domestic violence, serious assaults, sexual offenses, and offenses against the pursuit of justice will not be discontinued on the sole basis that a virtual complaint does not wish to proceed. A very important notice here by the DPP's office, just making sure that persons are reminded of the procedures.
Yes, and protocols are very important, especially in this time, Ron. So again, we're very happy to see Ms. Esprit really laying out the ground rules here. Viewers, we are so elated to kickstart today's newscast with some good news. Now, yesterday, Virgin Islands resident Mr. Michael Anthony received the keys to his newly built home as a part of the Housing Recovery Assistance Program. The keys were presented by Minister for Health and Social Development, Honorable Kelvin E, and Minister for Education, Culture, Youth Affairs, Fisheries and Agriculture, also our 7th District Representative, Dr. the Honorable Natalia Whitley. Now, Honorable Malone thanked the housing scheme for their continued efforts in addressing the housing needs of persons and explained that the team continues to work even during this time of restructuring and adapting to the current COVID-19 pandemic. The project, which began in December of 2019 by Winston Penn Construction, was completed just within 4 months, viewers, believe it or not. Beneficiary Mr. Anthony expressed his gratitude to the government of the Virgin Islands. Mrs. Alicia Brown and Mr. Greg Massacote of the Housing Recovery Assistance Program were also present during the formal handing over the keys. Now, viewers, the Housing Recovery Assistance Program, as we know it, is designed to help homeowners rebuild in wake of the hurricanes Irma and Maria, in accordance with the provisions of the Virgin Islands Housing Recovery Policy and Hurricane Irma Recovery Plan, that's 2017 to 2019. Now, Ron, post-Irma, I think this is the second time around we've been seeing a house being handed over with the contributions, of course, of the Virgin Islands Party government. Just last December, as we all can recall, we witnessed the home handover ceremony for Mr. Andy Ham out of North Sound, whose home was, of course, devastated by the storm. As we know it as well, this initiative was started and guided by one of our favorites, community activists, Mr. Arlington Creaky, compassionately known as Gumption. But we also saw government officials and thoughtful members of the community really chipping in to make this a reality. So Ron, we see here clearly that it still takes a village, and we are so extremely proud of this move by the government of the Virgin Islands to inject some level of joy and hope amidst everything that is already going on with COVID-19.
And Jovan, that is exactly what it does. A very beautiful story that reassures us there are still community-minded persons that care, and they're willing to come to the rescue of many of our residents who are having a difficult time. I absolutely love that story.
Yes.
Continuing on, Virgin Islander Mr. Kelvin E. Hodge of West End Tortola, BVI, is the new chairman of the BVI Ports Authority. His appointment comes just after Mr. Nathaniel Isaacs Sir resigned from the post of chairman on May 4th. Isaacs Sr. was appointed in May 2019. Mr. Hodge, a well-known businessman and civil servant, has served the government of the Virgin Islands for some 37 years in various capacities. He was recently appointed in March 2019 to serve on the Public Service Commission. Our newsroom reached out to Mr. Kelvin Hodge, and he did confirm that he received notice that he was selected to serve as chairman of the BVI Ports Authority, which he has accepted. However, he has not received an official correspondence confirming same as yet. Now, over the past years, the BVI Ports Authority has continued to see a number of leadership shifts throughout the organization. In March 2020, Interim Managing Director Mr. John M. Samuel also resigned shortly after completing a 3-month temporary appointment since January 2020. In October of 2019, Olivine Maynard was appointed to be the new acting Deputy Managing Director of the BVI Ports Authority, replacing Akeem R. Pickering. Now, recently, Jovan, throughout the Virgin Islands, there have been a number of local appointments. We would have recently covered in our newscast the appointments of former Principal Crown Counsel in the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, Mrs. Tiffany R. Scatliff-Esprit, who has become the first local appointed to the post of Director of Public Prosecutions on May 5th, 2020, after acting in the role since December 14th, 2019. Additionally, we covered the appointment of local Virgin Islander attorney, Ms. Dawn J. Smith, who has been chosen to serve as Attorney General, replacing Mr. Baba Aziz. And finally, former Deputy Governor and Speaker of the House of Assembly, Mrs. Inez V. Archibald, was selected by the Governor of the Virgin Islands, Augustus J.U. Jaspert, to serve as Chairman of the Public Service Commission. Mrs. Archibald will be replacing Mrs. Magdalene Romer as of June 1st, 2020. Jovan, this news is great news to many of us. A lot of persons in the Virgin Islands have been calling for locals to take up the helm of a lot of leadership positions, and this we see at the forefront happening very swiftly. So we want to, of course, wish each of them a congratulations again, and we wish them the very best as they continue to execute their duties in love for country.
And another shining example from government, the government of the Virgin Islands has been really pushing to instill some of that leadership role into, like you said, local. They believe from the beginning that local persons are capable, and we continue to see it day after day, stalwart leadership within various roles across the territory. So again, we are so thrilled to welcome another role, another set of locals to these various respective roles. Viewers, we have a lot more news coming your way. Cargo has resumed cargo operations at the Rotown Ferry Terminal. I know a lot of persons, especially you KFC lovers, are very excited about that. So more news after this commercial break.
Eco? 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 Everyone is speaking about eco-friendly products. We wanted to take the time to introduce the Eco Island brand. Eco Island is a brand dedicated to providing you with a reliable and cost-effective solution. Eco-friendly products for your restaurant, hotel, bar, office, and home. With takeaway trays, bags, cups, paper straws, cutlery, and cleaners. For more information, follow us at Eco Island 100.
Welcome back, viewers. Now, right before the break, we did mention that cargo runs have begun again at the Rotown Ferry Terminal, and that is very true. Effective today, May 19th, this was confirmed by the Minister of Health and Social Development, Honorable Kelvin Malone, who today said that the process was approved by the HEOC. Now, just 2 weeks ago, Premier of the Virgin Islands, Honorable Andrew Foy, had advised that in light of COVID-19, all cargo must be directed to the Port Purcell dock for the short term. At that time, he said, quote, when dealing with so much stuff coming from any port, it's not just a regular ferry run. So many grocery or whatever the case may be in terms of cargo coming over that now has to go to Port Purcell to ensure that all the protocols to safeguard persons on the boat, those who would have had to check the boat, those who are receiving the goods can be adhered to. And that is most effective right now at Port Purcell. Now, viewers, as we all can remember, this was met with mixed emotions as cargo coming through the port at that time was also subjected to a customs trade declaration, popularly known as that T12 form, which resulted, of course, in higher charges to the customer. Now, that decision, however, has been revised again as of today. Cargo has resumed at the Roadtown Ferry Terminal. Now, in speaking with Honorable Malone today, he said, quote, we now have established a procedure for safe handling from the USVI port to ensure that local persons are protected from the risk of contracting COVID-19. The government further said, quote, the unit spent time reviewing all protocols to ensure that if this is done, but in extremely limited circumstances, that all precautionary measures are put in place to ensure the safety of all, especially in regards to the ongoing fight against COVID-19, end of quote. Now, the coronavirus pandemic resulted in the BVI closing borders to all incoming travelers, but of course remained open to allow for the transport of cargo. Now, today marks another step back to normalcy right here in the British Virgin Islands. Now, Ron, the topic of cargo, I mean, has definitely caused some controversy recently in the territory. There were many speculations that the government at the time was trying to restrict persons from shopping in St. Thomas in light of, we were pushing the whole shop local initiatives, and of course in light of what's happening with COVID-19. But that has since been rebutted by the government, who said that the only change that was made at that time was that all the cargo would have needed to go through the Port Purcell dock instead, in light of what's happening again with COVID-19. And we saw persons lashing out. With that T12 came additional costs.
Of course.
And as we know it, a lot of our residents shop in St. Thomas, so that definitely was a problem. But fast forward to today, we now see services being restored at the Roadtown Ferry Terminal. So kudos to the government, especially for the persons who need the options. You know, a lot of persons have said it is a lot more affordable. And again, KFC lovers, I'm sure they are jumping for joy, for sure.
I'm sure many of them are, but most importantly, as you mentioned, there are many persons who would prefer and the option of having to purchase their goods in the United States Virgin Islands. And for that, we're thankful that some sense of normalcy has returned to the BVI public as it regards to shopping and getting their essential items.
Certainly.
And continuing on the regional scene, reports out of the Royal Gazette have reported that the Digicel Group 1 Limited, the telecommunications group's Bermudan-based holding company, has gone into provisional liquidation in Bermuda. The company has also filed for Chapter 15 recognition at a U.S. bankruptcy court in Manhattan. However, Digicel claims that the moves will not impact the regular operations of the company and are aimed at strengthening the company's balance sheet. A Digicel spokesperson said, and I quote, "It's important to point out that this will have no impact on our day-to-day operations, our staff, our suppliers, our customers, or any aspect of our ongoing activities. It is business as usual." Now, here are the facts, viewers. Digicel, which is owned by Irishman Dennis O'Brien, is going through a major reconstruction of some of the approximately $7.4 billion debt it carries in order that it can continue operating as a growing concern. Mike Morrison, Charles Tresh, and James Bennett of KPMG were appointed joint provisional liquidators of Digicel Group 1 by the Supreme Court in Bermuda on April 29th. The petition for Chapter 15 recognition was lodged in U.S. Bankruptcy Court of Southern District of New York by provisional liquidators. Background details set out the U.S. court documents shows that Digicel's revenue for the year ended on March 31st, 2019 were approximately $2.3 billion with an operating profit of approximately $479 billion. Now, the petition states, and I quote, However, in recent years, the group has seen significant reductions in voice revenues, which are largely due to the industry-wide trend of voice services being substituted by data usage by mobile subscribers. The petition goes on stating, and I quote, "The growth of the data revenue and revenues from other related services such as Digicel's business solutions and cable television and broadband businesses has not been sufficient to offset the decline in voice revenues." Now, in addition, the expansion of Digicel's business solutions and cable television and broadband businesses has required significant capital expenditures, which have reduced the group's ability to generate operating free cash flow and reduce its finance costs. The petition adds that increased competitive pressures had negatively impacted business. Now, as a result, the group finds itself with unsustainable levels of indebtedness, the petition states. As described above, the group's total outstanding debt was approximately $7.4 billion as of September 30th, 2019, and the finance costs of the group have been steadily increasing. The petition states, and I quote, "In the face of near-term maturities, increasing finance costs, and widening losses, the group determined that there was a need for a comprehensive restructuring of its capital structure that would reduce liabilities, improve the liquidity of profile, and provide flexibility for the group for further access capital in the future to fund its business." A digital spokesperson said the company had announced refinancing activities at the start of April, which, when complete, will strengthen our balance sheet by reducing our debt, extending our maturities, and reducing our ongoing financing costs. Now, the spokesperson added, following overwhelming support from our debt holders for these proposals, we are now progressing with the required administrative process. As such, we announced details of a proposed scheme of arrangement in the Bermudan courts in connection with Digicel Group 1 Limited, which is purely an intermediate financing holding company. It continues by saying, and I quote, "This scheme has the support of over 97% of its bondholders and also involves the appointment of light touch joint provisional liquidators to oversee the implementation of the scheme." The spokesperson added, "We will provide further updates on this as we progress." The petition filed in the U.S. court states that Bermuda is not merely a letterbox jurisdiction for Digicel and that the provisional liquidators have centralized the company's restructuring activities on island. The court documents were reported as well by Offshore Alert website. Jovan, essentially we see where a telecommunications company Digicel is citing business as usual despite going into provisional liquidation, which many would also call bankruptcy. We trust that many of our viewers were able to receive the facts of exactly what took place, exactly when and how as it pertains to these court filing documents, which were very important to the general public.
And it's very important that we continue to lay out the facts here at 284 Media because, Ron, ever since announcing the story, a lot of persons have identified it as fake news, stamped it as fake news. But it's very important, like you said, that we understand the protocols. First of all, there are different types of bankruptcies, which essentially determines how the business will be affected, if at all. And in light of the fact that we're going through a pandemic, this is not an isolated case by no chance, and especially for businesses who may have already been in some type of financial trouble even coming into the pandemic. So viewers, it's all about the facts. It's all about the facts, and of course we take pleasure in bringing just that to you here at 284 Media.
Now, still ahead, U.S. stops issuing passports except for life or death. This is a very important story that you don't want to miss. All this and more when 284 News returns. Is business slow? Cash flow down? Hosting an upcoming event? We can help. Advertise with 284 Media and take your business or event to the next level by enhancing your present marketing and messaging strategies. Allow our team of experts to create a personalized ad that sets your business apart from all the rest. This could be your business or event. So, what are you waiting for? Contact our marketing team at 284media@cctbvi.com. Advertising with us works. Some claim that the age of a true gentleman is far behind us, but here at 284 Media, we disagree. He may appear in different guises today, but the values and ideals that make him a gent still stand. 284 Media proudly presents its newest talk show, The Art of a Distinguished Gentleman, with yours truly, Ron Grant. a show poised to help guide modern-day men into 21st century distinguished gentlemen. Don't worry, it's not all about suits and bow ties, but raw, real-life lessons that translate to grounded, community-minded, well-rounded men. The Art of a Distinguished Gentleman, a 284 media production.
Viewers, welcome back. You are watching 284 News. Now, just yesterday, we touched on a very traumatic accident that was actually captured on video over the weekend. Now, we are here to report that the man tased and detained by police over the weekend has now been identified as Mr. Juwan Richardson. The 22-year-old of Greenland was yesterday charged with indecent language, resisting arrest, and assault on police. He was granted bail in the amount of $5,000 in his own recognizance to appear before the magistrate's court on June 26, 2020 at 9 a.m. Now, viewers, if you missed it, like we said, the entire ordeal was caught on camera. Let's watch.
I recorded! Please look at me! I recorded! Hey! Oh my God! It's Oh my God! He was talking to the police! Everything I recorded now, he was talking to the police! Don't do that! Oh, no! You're not wrong in what you've done! Come from there!
Now, Ron, I know that capture was pretty hard for a lot of persons to digest across the territory. And surprisingly, viewers, Mr. Richardson has had a history of disregarding law and order, as this is his third run-in with the law. Just back in February of 2017, he was fined in the magistrate's court for resisting arrest and also threatening police when they questioned why he was banging on a door in the Seacoast Bay area. He reportedly used profanity in response to the officers, further threatening to injure the police officer who arrested him at the time. As a result, the then 19-year-old was fined $350 and $200 respectively for resisting arrest and using threatening language. Now, to add to that, on May 3rd, the following year, 2018, he was apprehended once again and subsequently charged with dangerous driving, driving without a driver's license, and driving when not covered by insurance. His most recent accusation, however, follows a police intervention last Sunday. While on police patrol, officers of the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force observed a large gathering at the Queen Elizabeth Bridge, not adhering to the social distancing protocol, and advised them to disperse. The disorderly conduct of the man in question resulted in his arrest, and now 3 charges being laid against him. Now, Ron, we touched on this again briefly yesterday. Many residents have really condemned the act. Of course, it was fully captured on video, whether some of them were supporting the police in their stance of law and order, or there were other persons on the other side of the fence saying that this was certainly an abuse of police power. But many even said that even before the video began recording, a lot was going on even prior to them. But I think it's pretty interesting now to uncover that this same man has had other run-ins with the law, even going as far as disrespecting officers in the past. But I think whatever the issue is, whatever the underlying issue is here, I think we really have to find a way to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the community, because I think this is a bit much.
Well, Jovan, at the end of the day, there are always 2 coins or 2 sides to a story, and we take pleasure here in presenting the facts of the various elements. And what I think a lot of persons need to understand, particularly in a situation like this, just like we said, they need to understand all the facts and all the issues that may have contributed to the situation. Many of the persons weren't there. Seeing something on a video at a point when it was started versus what may have happened or transpired before does not give a very accurate picture of exactly what has happened or what transpired or what has been said. But most importantly, I want to make an appeal to the young people of the territory. As we've always talked about, the gap that seems to be between law enforcement and the public, particularly those in the younger generation. A lot of young people, particularly, just simply need to understand their rights. They need to know what they are capable and allowed to do. And I think once they understand that for the betterment of themselves, they would not usually find themselves in unpredictable positions. Now, don't get me wrong, there are cases where persons who are in law enforcement have been seen or have been accused of going a little bit overboard. But in this particular case, and in a lot of the cases, our general consensus, I think, and the younger generation of our public need to understand their rights. They also need to understand the role of the police officers in conducting law enforcement throughout the territory. And a lot of those charges that were laid out by yourself, that were listed, these are things that people should be aware of in speaking in aggravated behavior towards a police officer. So we want to make sure, and we really want to encourage our young people, employ them to act accordingly for their safety and for the safety of others. I think it's very important.
I agree with you, and a lot of persons have echoed your sentiment, the sentiment of education, and like you said, on both sides of the spectrums, what are our rights as civilians and what respect we ought to uphold as it relates to the law enforcers in the territory.
And while we're on the subject, there's a quick nugget that I want to interject here. A lot of persons, they're not in our line of work, so they would not come across the Constitution. But I want to encourage residents, that human rights chapter in the Constitution, if you do nothing else as a citizen of the British Virgin Islands, you need to read it, understand it, and simply know your rights. That human chapter on what are your rights and what are your liabilities and all that kind of stuff as it pertains to the Constitution. You have to know your rights as a citizen, and I encourage you all to get that document, and it's public knowledge, so it's not difficult, to make sure that you have the continued access. Continuing on now on our final story, a very important one at that matter. On the international scene, we are following reports out of the U.S. Time has reported that the U.S. State Department has stopped issuing passports due to the COVID-19 pandemic, with exceptions for people who are qualified for a life or death emergency. Now, in a statement published on March 27th, the State Department advised Americans to avoid all international travel due to the spread of COVID-19 unless someone is experiencing an emergency and needs to travel within 72 hours. Situations that qualify as life or death emergencies include serious illnesses, injuries, or deaths among members of a person's immediate family that requires travel outside of the U.S. According to this statement, people who need a passport for emergency travel at this time are required to provide proof of the emergency, such as a death certificate or a signed letter from a hospital or a doctor, along with proof of international travel like a ticket or flight itinerary, and a passport application with supporting documents. Routine applications or renewal requests for passports that come after March 20th will not receive expedited service, and the State Department has said regular services may be delayed. Jovan, a very big story, a major story we see coming out of the U.S. where passports from the United States of America are essentially being halted, and persons are being told that renewals will not be taking place, and no time frame has been given as to when exactly that will be in the near future.
Well, one of the things we know for sure is ever since the World Health Organization declared this crisis a pandemic, we've seen a major decline in international travel. And what we saw is an increase in interstate travel within the United States of America. But one of the things that we are privileges we are able to enjoy even within the Caribbean, and we reported on this yesterday, is the fact that we were so proactive in shutting down travel and our borders, which resulted in us being able to I think effectively handle the health aspect of things and not necessarily overwhelm our health resources. And so in the United States, that's a completely different reality. I mean, they have not only become the epicenter of the virus with the most confirmed cases, but they have now recorded the most deaths. So I don't think this is an unprecedented move per se by President Trump, but nevertheless, we continue to see some really strange things happening in light of what's happening with COVID-19.
And like you said, strange things, because it definitely shows how much COVID has impacted the world and business as usual. It's definitely something that's taking its toll on us all across the world.
All right, viewers, that is it for today's news roundup. Be sure to follow us for daily news updates at 284media.com. We're also on Facebook at 284media and on Instagram and Twitter at 284BVI. My name is Javon Wilson.
And I'm Ron Grant. We'll see you again tomorrow as we deliver your daily dose of local, regional, and international content. We're 284 News, your source for honest and impartial news right here on 284 Media. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
We understand that you cannot come to the store and encourage you to stay at home. If you need assistance with bill payments, top-ups, or troubleshooting, we are here to help. Call us at 444-4444 from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. daily, or visit our website at www.cctbvi.com. Click Top Up here or My CCT for top-up or bill payments. Social distancing with CCT.